People always said my husband was charming. He knew how to fill a room with laughter, how to make strangers feel special, how to turn every mistake into a story worth retelling. I used to think that was love. That being the quiet one in the background meant I was lucky because he chose me. Until the day he left me stranded in a foreign town, without money, a phone signal, or even a clue where I was. Until I realized it wasn't a mistake. It was a game. And when he laughed, "Let's see how she gets back," he had no idea what kind of woman I'd become by the time he found me again. Because I didn't come back. I rose. And I took something. With me, he never expected to lose. Control. I should have known something was off the second he turned the car around. The sun was setting over Ronda, that picturesque Spanish town with cobblestone streets and orange rooftops that Ethan swore I'd love. We were supposed to be celebrating his promotion, our second honeymoon, a rare getaway from New York. But like most things with Ethan, it had slowly become about him, his friends, and his image. It started with lunch. I asked him gently not to drink so much. His third glass of wine had just tipped, and Ryan, his law school best friend and resident instigator, grinned at me like I was the killjoy of the group. "She's always keeping you on a leash, man," Ryan said, loud enough for the whole cafe to hear. Ethan laughed. The others laughed. I didn't. I excused myself and stepped outside. I needed air. I needed a break from the performance. Ethan followed a minute later, glassy-eyed and irritated. "Why do you always do this?" he hissed. "Do what?" "Make a scene, embarrass me in front of my friends." "They were embarrassing me, Ethan. Ryan called me a leash," he scoffed. "He was joking." "God, Claire, you're so sensitive." We argued. Of course we did. Years of swallowed frustration rose to the surface like a wave. I told him I was tired of pretending, tired of shrinking to fit inside his perfect, polished world. He told me I was ungrateful, dramatic, a liability to his image. Then he said it. "Your purse has your passport, right?" I blinked. "What? Does that have to do with anything?" "Then you'll figure it out," he muttered, walking backwards toward the rental car. "You're smart. Always telling me what to do anyway." "Ethan," I warned, "don't you dare." But it was too late. The door slammed. The engine started. The headlights flared as the car rolled past me. Ryan leaned out the window, grinning like a child. "Let's see how she gets back." They peeled off, their laughter echoing down the narrow street, fading with the sound of tires against cobblestones. I stood there in stunned silence, the taste of rage and disbelief mixing in the back of my throat. My mouth was still open. I hadn't even finished the sentence I'd been yelling, and now, nothing. Just the night air and a group of Spanish tourists watching me from a nearby patio like I was part of the evening's entertainment. Told myself he'd come back. That this was just one of Ethan's cruel power plays, dramatic, obnoxious, and temporary. He'd turn around. He always did. But he didn't. 15 minutes passed, then 30. The light shifted, the sun dipped behind the buildings, and the warmth in the air began to cool. My phone had no signal, no Wi-Fi. I checked my purse. Passport? Yes. Phone? Dead. Cash? Around 70 euros. A handful of US dollars in my makeup pouch. My credit cards? Gone. Ethan had taken them earlier, for safekeeping, because my purse was too small. Of course he had. I sat on a stone bench near the plaza, the last fragments of denial slipping through my fingers like sand. It wasn't a joke. Not really. It was a message. Don't question me. Don't embarrass me. Don't forget who's in control. A chill crept over my skin. I was alone, in a country I didn't know, in a town whose name I could barely pronounce. I pulled out my phone and found a cafe with a power outlet. The barista didn't speak English, but she pointed kindly to a wall where I could plug in. I ordered a single espresso and waited. When the screen finally flickered on, I called Ethan. Straight to voicemail. I called again. And again. Same. I texted him. Where are you? This isn't funny. I don't have money. Please. Ethan. Nothing. I called Ryan. Blocked. I called Marco. Blocked. I called every number from the trip's group text. All blocked. I was shaking now. Not just from anger, but from something deeper. Something primal. The realization that I had just been left behind, not accidentally, not impulsively, but intentionally. I found the cheapest pension I could, a tiny room above a bakery that smelled of yeast and old soap. The owner was kind, older, spoke only Spanish, but understood enough when I pointed to my ring finger, my passport, and mimed a car driving away. She handed me a key with a look that said, "You're not the first." The room had a single bed and a cracked sink. I closed the door behind me, leaned against it, and slid to the floor. My hands were still shaking. At some point that night, I cried. But not for long. Because there's something strange that happens when the world drops out from under you. After the panic comes a silence, a clarity. I counted my money, did the math. Enough for maybe 2 nights. Enough for bread, maybe a bus ticket. Not enough for a flight. I opened my purse, stared at the one thing that might still hold value. The ring. Ethan had upgraded it on our 5-year anniversary. 2 carats, platinum band, symbol of love. Ownership. Status. I took it off and stared at it for a long moment. Then I slid it into my palm, closed my fist, and whispered to myself, "Let's see how I get back." But deep down, I already knew. I wasn't going back. By morning, the air in Rhonda felt different. Colder, thinner. The bakery beneath my room had started up early, the scent of fresh bread briefly fooling my brain into thinking everything was normal. But it wasn't, and it wouldn't be. I used half my remaining euros to buy a small breakfast and then headed straight for a pawn shop I'd Googled in the night. It was a 15-minute walk. Every step echoed like a drumbeat. This is real. This is happening. The man behind the counter didn't ask questions. He looked at the ring, nodded once, and offered me a number that made my stomach drop. It was worth 3 times that at least, but I wasn't in a position to negotiate. He slid the euros across the glass. I pocketed the cash, nodded my thanks, and walked out with nothing but my passport, a phone with no data, and a backpack holding the bare minimum: change of clothes, charger, travel-sized shampoo. I didn't know where I was going. I just knew it couldn't be back. Before we continue the story, I want to take a moment to connect with you. Yes, you watching this right now. Where are you watching from? Drop your country's flag in the comments below. I'd love to know. And if you're watching this alone, maybe on your phone late at night, I want you to remember something. No matter where you are not alone. Because right now I'm here, with you, sharing this story, step by step. Now, back to how I disappeared, and reappeared as someone new. I took a bus south. It didn't matter where it ended up. Anywhere was better than Rhonda. I chose a random seaside route, something coastal. The water felt like it would heal something in me. By nightfall, I was in southern Portugal, a fishing village so small it didn't even show up properly on Google Maps. The kind of place where the sea came right up to the edge of the street, where cats ruled the alleys and grandmothers ruled everything else. I got off the bus dizzy with exhaustion, my feet sore and my shoulders aching. I walked until the road gave way to sand. Then I walked some more. Eventually, my legs gave out. Right there, on the edge of a dirt path overlooking the water, I collapsed. Everything blurred, trees swayed, the horizon tipped, and the last thing I saw was the shape of someone running toward me. When I woke up, I smelled rosemary and wood smoke, The ceiling was wooden, low. The bed was soft but creaked with every breath. A bowl of something warm sat on the table next to me, steam still rising from it. And beside me sat a woman, small, weathered, her eyes sharp and kind all at once. "You're awake now," she said softly. Then, realizing I didn't understand, she pointed to herself. "Anna." I tried to sit up. My head swam. "Claire?" I whispered. She smiled, pressing the spoon toward my lips. Over the next few hours, I learned the basics. Anna lived alone. Her daughter had moved to Canada 10 years ago. She spoke minimal English, but made up for it with gestures and a kind of fierce warmth that reminded me of my grandmother. I stayed with her that night. Then the next. Then longer. At first, I offered to clean, to sweep, to help her carry the heavy baskets of herbs she grew behind her cottage. Then she handed me a wrapped bar, olive oil soap, handmade, and pointed to a basket full of them. "Farah," she said. "Market." She took me there the following Saturday. The stall was simple: soaps, salves, tiny jars of herbal oil. The people who passed by greeted Anna like she was family. She introduced me with one word: amiga. Friend. I didn't cry then, not until later that night, when I was washing dishes, and she handed me a towel and said very slowly, "Home. Acqui. For now." That was the moment something cracked open in me. I'd spent years thinking I had a home in New York, that our brownstone, our polished kitchen, our couple's dinners with Ethan's clients was stability. But it had never been mine. It had always belonged to him. Here, with Anna, among the scent of lavender and sun-dried towels, something else started growing. Not comfort, not security, but peace. I began helping her full-time, carrying buckets of rainwater to her garden, pressing flowers between heavy books, melting beeswax, stirring oils. She taught me everything, sometimes with words, often without. We created a rhythm: work in the mornings, market on weekends, bread and tea in the afternoons. One day she handed me a bar of soap I had made myself. It was lopsided, the color uneven. I frowned. "Bonita," she said, tapping my chest. "Você fez isso. Beautiful. You made this." Something shifted in me that day, something deep, because for the first time in years, I wasn't performing. I wasn't editing myself. I wasn't trying to keep up or shrink down. I was just being, and in the quiet of those early mornings, while the sea mist curled over the hills and Anna hung herbs to dry, I realized something. I didn't need to be rescued. I was rebuilding, one small, fragrant, imperfect bar at a time. It had been 74 days, 74 mornings of waking up without checking my phone, 74 nights of falling asleep to the sound of ocean waves instead of Ethan's shallow breathing beside me. I hadn't planned to count, but my body knew. Healing has its own calendar. Anna and I were at the Saturday market again. Our stall smelled of rosemary and lemon balm. I had arranged the soaps by color this time: lavender on one side, eucalyptus in the middle, citrus on the end. The new label I designed read, "Feito com mãos e coração," made with hands and heart. It was late morning when I smelled something out of place. Not the sea air, not herbs or oil or fresh bread. Cologne, sharp, manufactured, expensive. I turned before. I even knew why. And there he was. Ethan, standing at the edge of the marketplace in crisp, wrinkle-free clothes that screamed, "I don't belong here." His sunglasses reflected the stalls, the villagers, me. And when he took them off, his eyes scanned until they locked on mine. Shock. Disbelief. Then, that same smug confidence he always wore like cologne. He walked toward me like a man entering a courtroom he expected to win. I didn't move. I didn't speak. "Claire," he said, as if I'd only stepped out for a minute and not vanished into an entirely different life. I finally found you. I said nothing. He glanced around the market, nose wrinkling. This is where you've been? He gestured, vaguely. Selling soap? I crossed my arms. What are you doing here, Ethan? I came to bring you home. There it was. No apology, no explanation. Just a statement, as if I were a dog that had wandered off leash and now needed to be collected. You left me in Spain, I said, voice calm but flat. Do you remember that? You drove away. You blocked my number. Your friends laughed. He sighed, exasperated already. Claire, come on. It was a mistake. A stupid, drunken moment. Ryan said you'd be fine. I felt my stomach twist. Ryan, of course. You weren't answering. And then days passed and I didn't know how to fix it. So I waited. But this? Disappearing? Running off to make soap in the middle of nowhere? That's not you. You don't know who I am. I do, he insisted. You're my wife. You love modern design and rooftop bars, and reading the last page of a novel first. You hate messy places. You cried when we lost that sushi reservation. You're not this. He said, this, like it was something dirty, humble, unworthy of someone like me. I looked down at my hands. They were stained slightly green from drying herbs. The nails chipped, rough around the edges. But they were steady, strong, capable of building something, not just holding someone else's world together. You left me, I said again. And the thing is, Ethan, you weren't just leaving me in Spain. You'd been leaving me for years. Every time you told me my ideas were cute, every time you handled the finances and said, don't worry your pretty head, every time you used my silence to decorate your success. I provided for you, he snapped. You never had to worry. No, I just had to disappear. His jaw tensed. Claire, you're being dramatic. No, I said quietly. I'm finally being honest. For a second, he looked lost, like the cracks in his carefully polished shell were starting to show. But then he reset his expression, confident, persuasive. Look, I didn't come to argue, he said. I've booked us a flight. Athens to New York. Business class. We can talk on the plane. Start fresh. This little detour, whatever it was, it's over. Come home. I studied him. The perfect plane of his suit jacket, the casual confidence in his stance. I am home, I said. He blinked. Don't be ridiculous. You want to know why you really came? I stepped forward now, closing the space between us. Because people started asking questions. Your colleagues noticed I wasn't at events. Your parents stopped hearing from me. The image started cracking, didn't it? He said nothing. You didn't miss me, I continued. You missed the version of me that made you look good. But she's gone, Ethan. She died somewhere between Rhonda and this village, and I'm not going back to resurrect her. You're throwing away everything, he said sharply. No, I said. I'm finally keeping something myself. He shook his head, stepping back like he couldn't quite believe any of this was happening. You'll regret this. I might, I said, but at least it'll be my regret. Behind me, Anna had appeared quiet as ever, watching us with protective eyes. She couldn't understand the words, but she understood energy. She nodded toward me, then stepped closer, her hand resting lightly on my arm. I turned back to Ethan. I'm not afraid of being alone, I said. I'm afraid of losing myself again. That's the only thing I'll never let happen. He stared at me for a long moment. Then, without another word, he put on his sunglasses, turned, and walked away. As he disappeared into the crowd, something strange happened. I didn't feel victory. I didn't feel rage. I felt free. Not the wild kind of freedom that comes with Escape. The quiet kind. The kind that sinks in slowly, like sunlight through a window. The kind that lets you breathe. Anna squeezed my hand once and led me back to the stall. I picked up a bar of soap, lavender my favorite, and placed it back in line. There was still work to do, and I was still here to do it. The day Ethan left for good, I expected to feel shattered. But instead, I felt light, like someone had quietly unlocked a door I didn't realize was keeping me in. Life didn't pause. There were soaps to wrap, herbs to dry, and a market to prepare for. Anna didn't ask questions. She just handed me a mug of tea and said, "Strong. You." Days passed, then weeks. And slowly this place, this tiny village tucked between cliffs, and sea began to feel less like a stopover and more like a beginning. One morning, Anna pulled out a dusty binder from her cupboard. Inside were business notes, recipes, a basic sales log. She looked at me with those calm, steady eyes and said, "Together?" I nodded, trying not to cry. We built something. I redesigned labels, opened a tiny online shop, and before long, we were shipping orders beyond the village. The soaps had my fingerprints on them now, literally and metaphorically. A few weeks later, I got an email from my former design mentor in New York. A remote consulting job was still open. I took it, not because I missed the city, but because I finally had space to use my skills for myself, not just for someone else's ambition. As for Ethan, he signed the divorce papers without a word. His silence said everything. Anna planted a new olive tree in her garden soon after. She pointed to it and said, "Claire." I laughed. But I understood. I hadn't just survived what happened to me. I had grown through it. And when I walk through the village now, sun on my face and sea air in my lungs, I don't feel lost anymore. I feel home. This story isn't just about betrayal or a broken marriage. It's about rediscovering yourself when everything falls apart. Sometimes the most painful endings become the beginning of something far more powerful: freedom, purpose, and self-worth. If this story meant something to you, drop a 2 in the comments if you liked it, or a 7 if it didn't quite hit for you. I genuinely want to hear your thoughts. And if you believe stories like this deserve to be shared, don't forget to like this video and subscribe to the channel so we can keep walking through more powerful journeys together. Thank you for being here.